Hi, everybody. Today is Shiny Happy Polymer Everywhere. Shiny Happy Polymer. So I know
So,
Gabby's here. I'm going to... Oh, go ahead.
yeah, Gabby's here. Jessica's officially here now. And I'm saying
Hello.
hello to the rest.
Hello, Gabby. Hello, Jessica. You really do. Christy Friesen was saying on her lives, you feel like Miss Jean on Romper Room. And I see Gabby, and I see Jessica.
Oh. Can I be the male romper room lady?
Do you have your magic mirror?
I do have I do have a magic mirror. We can trot out Ginger and be the magic doggy. There used to be where I grew up. There was a lady called Hobo Kelly, and she had magic glasses. And your parents would send in that it was your birthday, right? And so at one point during the show, she'd look through her glasses and say, "I see a lot of birthdays," and then throw your name out there.
So Miss Jean did it with her magic mirror
Okay.
on Romper Room. So, who else we
So
got here?
we got Knitting Nun Kim Sterling. That's a great name. Says hi all. Patricia Burden says hello. And that's
Well,
it so far.
hello. That's fine. That's fine. So today, I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about using DeepShine and using UV resin and using liquid clay to get these really, really shiny finishes. And so I thought I'd,
Well, hold on one second. Does everybody see Cynthia's camera? Because I got a problem where I'm still seeing the starting scene.
this is me waiting patiently.
Yeah, it does look like the camera is glitching. There we go. Why is the camera glitching, sweetie?
I don't know.
We got an excellent
Seems,
thing.
seems to have
Yours
calmed
looks
down.
good.
Seems to
Good.
have calmed down. Seems to have calmed down. We'll just keep an eye on that.
Yeah. It was like paused. It was the weirdest thing for me.
Okay. All right. So, like I said, a lot of people have, um, questions about using. I was going to try to watch on YouTube tonight, but it's not working. Um, a lot of questions about UV resin and deep shine and all these ways that we get glossy finish.
I know what it
So,
is, sweetie. The camera's in autofocus. Keep going. I'm sorry.
okay. So this little bird here, this was UV resin right here. Um, this is a bead I did with Deep Shine, and it's one of the great things about Deep Shine is you can put it on curved and round objects like that. This is UV resin. Believe it or not, these two are liquid clay. Kato liquid clay in particular. That's what I have the best result with. And this finish is actually on a piece of wood, but it's liquid clay on a piece of wood. I did a miniature paint pour on a piece of wood. So, and how's it going? Is it better for everybody?
You are better. It was just after a reboot, the camera goes back to autofocus, and I forgot to uncheck the little checkbox.
So, one thing that I did want to discuss is um, if you're going to
Can you show
use.
some of those again? Somebody would like me to zoom in.
Sure. Oh, sure. Okay. So
Your center screen.
let's not this one. This one hasn't been done up yet. So this little bird here, And I'll go like this, so you're going to be able to see my lights. I'm sorry about that. But this little bird was done with Magic Gloss with UV resin. It's basically mica shift clay, and I silk screened the word on there, and then a little bit of copper paint, and then I used UV resin. And the way that I did that, because I had already put a bale, I had baked a bale into the back. Um, I put them over a smaller than this. If I put him on this, he's gonna, yeah, flip, or she's gonna flip. But I put him over a smaller circle cutter so that I could keep it level. We'll use this cutter. So I could keep that level while I put some UV resin on it. We'll put that there so everybody can see. This is also some UV resin. And this I did a little bit differently. Don't pay too much attention to the back. But what I did is I baked I baked this faux wood ring, and I put a piece of packing tape on the back, and then I put some resin right here in the center. I didn't fill it all the way up. Um, I went ahead and cured the resin, and then I put down these little flowers, and I put more resin over that. And then this is a demonstration piece. I actually used some two-part resin to attach the veil to the back. But I'm not doing two-part resin today. I'm not the hugest fan of resin because it's fraught with peril. I mean, when it works good, it works really good. But unless you're using it a whole lot, um, you lose the skill pretty quick. I'm actually a little nervous about using it tonight.
So what
So,
you're saying is it's a lot like me. When I'm good, I'm really good. When I'm bad, I'm really, really bad. Um, Deborah Gabriel says hello,
hello, Deborah.
and Knitting Nan Kim says clever.
Thank you very much. Now, these I did with liquid clay. So this is actually a paint pour, a little miniature paint pour that I did over a wooden disc. That's a wooden disc. And again, forgive my backs here. These are my experiments. And then I actually used liquid clay over that because I didn't have any resin at the time.
And it's
So
fraught with
that
peril.
I just didn't have any. Do you remember the great resin spill
Yes, I
of
remember. Yes.
the great resin spill debacle of 2019? So I just didn't happen to have any UV resin at the time. Um, this little starfish here, again, I baked him up. He has his bail on him and all that. And then I put him in a cutter like this, and I put the liquid clay on there, and there you go, nice and shiny. And I'll go over it with you, but I get the best results with Kato liquid clay. And this is from my Go with the Flow Fluid Art Techniques with polymer clay paint, where I teach you how to make some polymer clay paint. And again, this is liquid clay. And in order to get the curve in it, what I did is when it came out of the oven, I put it over like a big half round cake mold, like a half ball cake mold. So there you go. But the first thing that I want to talk about with
So before you get rolling, Mary
okay.
Vanderwood says hi, Cynthia, and Joanne Bright says
Hi,
glad to be
Mary.
here.
Hello, hello. Thank you for coming by. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm unable to see chat on the phone, so we'll set up another. We're
Yeah,
trying
we're
to
set
figure
up.
out how to get. I have a laptop next to me, but the laptop is set up so that people can see my hands. We want to make sure people can see, my hands and keep them in focus. So that looks a little stretched. But
Well, I'll go back to home
I,
there. Not, it's not a lot stretched. It was just It might be your laptop, sweetie.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm sorry. I had a really crazy day today. we, we shop as little as possible because, we're supposed to be sheltering in place until June 12th. But we did have to run out and go shopping today. And what happened to me is we had gone to Aldi's, but we can't get everything we need at Aldi's. So from Aldi's, we went to Ingles. And on the way to Ingles, it started to rain really hard. And I said, "Oh well, then we won't bother going to Ingles." But then it stopped raining. Beautiful sunshine, looked great. And I went into Ingles, and when I came out of Ingles, it was downpouring. I mean, just downpouring. There was just no way. I don't have Mish come into the grocery store with me because he's much higher risk than I am, and I was trying to get all my groceries put it and it just was terrible. It just was terrible how bad it was raining, and then Ingles is only like 3 minutes from the house. So, get in the car and I'm soaking wet. You know that feeling, your clothes are all wet and everything, and I'm so uncomfortable. And then by the time we got to the house, it was beautiful and sunny again. And I
Ingles
haven't
is
been wet
like half a
since.
mile away, and we got no rain here. The driveway was dry. So during the story, I already got Mary. Barb Larson says she made it.
Oh, thank you, Bob. I'm so glad to see you.
And
Or
Knitting
sort
Them
of.
Kim said those pieces are very nice.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very
and
much.
Jessica said she bought your Go with the Flow video, and she just hasn't cracked it open yet.
Yeah, it's that one's pretty involved. That one's pretty involved. Because you make your own polymer paint and then you do. I got some really pretty effects with it. I really did. This is one that isn't quite shined up yet, and I like that cell that I got there. So that one's it's a bit more involved, but gosh, it was a lot of fun. I was very proud of myself for thinking it all up too. Um, but the
Yeah,
point that I
when it
want to make
rains, it does pour, Mary. That's very true.
But the point that I wanted to make was if you're going to use resin or magic gloss or anything like that, you still have to start with like a clean piece. So and I wanted to point out that starts way before baking. Way before baking. You want to take your time and get your edges as nice as you can get them. Um, like for this one here, I'm just gonna push push with my blade. I don't know that I would put uh, resin or anything like that on this. I might. And this is from a slab that I made. I'm experimenting with slabs. And a slab is basically a thick veneer, right? And this slab, has a lot of dimension to it. And the other thing that you want to do is, look at your piece really carefully, and you want to see like, do I have any dust in there? Do I have any dog hair in there? And there's two substances that I use to kind of clean a piece up. And one is alcohol. Put a little bit of alcohol in there. And the other is baby oil. Baby oil, I use more for, say I had an actual sculpture of a face and I wanted to smooth it out. I put just a little bit of baby oil on a brush, and then you can kind of brush out, any little wrinkles or anything like that that you have in skin or in a sculpture. For most things, I will use alcohol, and you can use it on a brush, you
So,
know.
sweetie, Paula Eppley didn't know we were streaming today, and is glad she found us.
I'm glad you found us too, Paula. I'm glad
And
too.
Deborah Gabriel is that the one you posted the other day?
Yes, it is. And Mish will tell you that I sat there with that veneer. We should have kept a photo of it to post, but I sat there with that veneer saying, "Do I want to cut this up?" I think I just want to make a box top out of it or something, but you can use some alcohol. This is not much alcohol, and that will help you get your edges smooth. You know, sometimes you can use alcohol on a brush to take out like a little piece of, if you see some lint or something like that in there. You can also use Q-tip with alcohol on it. I'm going to take a lot of that alcohol off. And sometimes that will get those pesky little pieces of lint and dog hair and cat hair and everything else that we get. Um, Now, I gave in the notes, Misha, I gave you a link to these. They're makeup applicators. I guess it's to do that cat eye, that hip modern cat eye. But I find these um, pretty useful. There we go. Got it out. Got it out. Got that little. Yeah, I know you guys can't see it, but I can. Right? So you really want to work and make sure that you've done everything you can to get your piece neat and clean. There's nothing that gets better in the oven. There if you've got some sort of lump or a bubble or something like that, it's not going to get any better in the oven. So that's like a dimensional piece. Here I was using some scrap clay, and it's the scrap clay is actually pretty thin. So the first thing that I did is, I know I'm going to put a back on these. I don't care if the back gets shiny spots. I know I'm going to put another back on them after they're all baked. So the first thing I did is I put this veneer that I made on the right on the tile, and I cut these shapes on the tile. And the reason for that is because it's only like on the medium setting. It's pretty thin. And if I cut these someplace else and then try to put them on the tile, they'd distort. They're not like the other piece I showed you that's actually, pretty thick, and usually you can pick those up and move them. But these would distort. And I usually spend a lot of time burnishing prior to cutting, but then even after cutting, if I see some areas that got a little bit wrinkled up, or a little bit messed up, I'll take my deli paper here and I'll do a little bit more burnishing. And burnishing is extremely helpful to reduce the amount of time that you have to sand things. And again, I'm going to go through, I don't know what this is, but it's a little piece of red something.
I go through in the middle of the night and just put dots on her stuff just to irritate her.
And again, you really want to clean up edges if you can. The edges are actually pretty easy to sand afterwards. I lost my favorite tool here. But there's those wipeout tools that you can use. This one isn't my favorite one, but those can be used to clean up the edges a little bit. Not a lot. I didn't leave myself a lot of room in between these.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful looking shot.
Right? Just get them just as cleaned up as you can before you put them in the oven. And if you have gotten some distortion, it can be, I can see over here I have a little distortion. Just take a blade and sort of push that in. So all those things help a lot, right? Because you shouldn't be spending hours and hours and hours sanding. The first, generally I will start with 400, and that first grit, that 400 grit, will take like 4 or 5 minutes, maybe, not even. And then the rest of the grits go very quickly. If you're finding that you have to sand at that first grit for hours and hours and hours, well, pay attention to what you're doing before you bake it. You can really get a lot of things cleaned up and looking pretty, so that by the time you get it out of the oven, it doesn't require that much sanding. One of the things that I learned to do over the years, let me see if I just have a piece of clay.
So, sweetie, Gabby says your voice is very soothing. Hey, John, welcome in. Yes, I forgot to send you a reminder. I apologize. I'm a bad
Just
me.
gonna. He is a bad news. So this is some clay we're gonna use next week, but I'm just gonna show you here. I didn't get the link for it, but in Ginger Davis Allman's newsletter this week, she talked about a tool. This is a June newsletter, but she talked about a tool that she uses to get rid of the mark. If you're using metal cutters, it usually leaves like a little lump, little tab. I don't know if you guys can see that. There's just like a
I can
little,
go in more. Hold on a minute. Put it back there. As I go in, it might distort a little, but we'll catch the doohickey. There you go. You can point out the little lump now.
so it leaves just a little mark. That doesn't happen with the plastic cutters, but it happens with the um, little bump out. It happens with metal cutters, and boy howdy, you're like, oh, I'll just sand that out. That won't be any problem. I can sand that right out, but it does tend to be a problem. And so Ginger says she uses that deburring tool. I just use a craft blade. I'm holding it straight up and down, and I just carefully shave that off. So those are all things that you can do to make finishing after baking better. Because what you want to keep in mind is when you use resin or liquid clay or even, oh, I meant to show everybody, this is a bead that I was able to do with DeepShine, because the greatest thing about DeepShine is you can brush it onto curved objects and so on. But they're not going to cover up any defects. And in fact, what they're probably going to do is magnify any defects that you have in the piece. So,
So
okay.
it's, so it's like having your own private little 4K camera.
Who has their own private little 4K camera? What does that mean?
Well, you were saying magnify your defect. The first thing,
Yeah.
we noticed when we went to 4K was, oh crap, we never saw that before.
Yeah. 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 Okay, so I have some pieces here, and they're baked up, and I did take the time to sand the edges and sand any like truly lumpy bumpy bits. But these are pretty good candidates, for resin or liquid clay or anything like or the DeepShine, right? Now I'm going to start with the UV resin. I'm going to start with that. Now, this is Lisa Pavelka Magic Glos. This bottle happens to be empty. And you cannot refill it that I can see. I
Oh,
can't
I
figure
can
out how
show
to
you how to
refill it.
refill it. You can pop that top out.
Can you?
Yep.
Okay, so later on, Mish will pop the top off. Because to be a little bit more economical, I bought this big bottle, this big 6 fluid ounce bottle. But then I couldn't figure out how to how to refill it. So I have it. I feel a little bit crazy. I have it in this bottle. All right, this is a squeeze bottle, and this is called a Lure Lock. And so there's two links, Mish. There's a link to Amazon, and there's a link to epoxyjewelry.com. And so I poured this into here, and I have it covered with foil because I don't want it to harden in the bottle. Now, if you go to the epoxy clay site, he has these bottles, and then he has a blue bottle that you can put this bottle inside of, so you don't have to keep wrapping it in foil like a nutcase. But you know, unfortunately, that just happens to be where I'm at right now. Now, um, your best bet when you're using resin, I'm going to put my finger here just in case, is you want to store it like in a cup or something upside down. That's your best bet. I didn't have the ability to do that here. And I also want to mention for both DeepShine and the UV resin, let me see if anybody can see this. You know, I have this UV light. Now, I got mine from Tiny Pandora.com, and it usually has a deck on the bottom that you can slide out. And I don't use that because normally what I'll do, just to make sure I don't spill the resin or get drips, is I'll put resin on a piece, and then I will put the light over the resin. You know, rather than moving the piece to a UV light, I'd rather move the light, not the piece with the resin on it. And that is like there is like a reflective surface on that deck. I've got two UV lights, and I've lost the deck to both of them. So what I have here is just an ordinary tile, and the tile is covered with foil, and I'm sorry if that's very glary. I don't know any other way to do this. And I just have this little piece. It's a little mica shift piece, and it you know, like I said, after it was baked, I took it out, and I did some sanding on it. Now, if you really want to, you can take a toothpick and, you know, get a little puddle of resin and put some resin along the side of this piece, and then cure it, and then come back and do the top. I don't really do that, but, well, maybe I'll show it. Maybe I'll show it. So I've got just put a drop of resin down there. And drops of resin become important. And I'm just going to pick a little bit up. And I'm going to put it around the sides. So if that was important to you, for the sides to be shiny, you know, this is pretty much how you would do it. So I'm just spreading the resin on there. And I'm trying hard not to get it on my fingers, but that's not working out real well. And I also have the UV light itself sitting on a sheet of aluminum foil. Aluminum foil is your friend. All right. Now, the best case scenario would be that you would go ahead and get those sides cured before you moved on.
Can
Get
you
my little bit.
cure the sides flat like that, or do you need to reposition it? I've always been curious.
Well, that's why I set the UV light on foil and I wrap the tile with foil so that the reflection will cure that for you.
Ah, okay.
And
I
it's
missed.
it's usually enough to cure it. Now,
Uh,
if you go ahead,
no, it's okay.
go.
I was just going to say I was clipping links and I didn't catch that part.
And I'm using some alcohol to clean up my fingers because I got a little bit on my fingers. Now, if you read um, the directions for Magic Gloss, they say to start in the middle and work your way out. And a lot of people have a really hard time with that. They get a lot of overflow. You know, it's I call it resin blindness. Sometimes as you're using resin, it's all just so shiny and reflective that you can't really see, where you're going with it. Um, or other people complain a lot that Magic Gloss is a real doming resin. And so it pulls back from the edge like that. It's supposed to do that. Um, Now, what I've seen Teresa Salgado and some other people do is I'm going to let this flow down. What I've seen them do is they start at the edge with it. They actually do the edge, cure it, and then fill it in. So I've got it in this bottle, and sometimes this stuff it has bubbles. So I always just go ahead and squeeze just a few drops out because the bubbles will be in that drop rather than on my piece. Hopefully, hopefully. And so I am going to try this. We're going to try just getting it on the edge of this piece.
So you're kind of building a dam, is what you're doing.
Yeah, and this helps with the pulling back from the edges. Now, if you buy from that epoxy jewelry place, his is meant to go on the edge first.
Now, is that self-doming stuff, or do I have the wrong stuff?
No, it's the right stuff, and I actually got some overflow on this piece, so I am going to take some Q-tips and some alcohol, and I'm going to clean that up.
So Paul Eppley says that she has to do the top edge first, cure, and then work from the center out.
Yeah,
That's the way she does it.
yeah. So a couple of things. So I'm gonna put this in, and remember this drop here. I'm gonna use the drop to tell me when it's cured. Right. So rather than touch this piece to see if it's cured, I'm gonna touch that drop right there.
Ah, built-in litmus test.
Yeah. Ask me how I figured that out. Like how many times I touched the
I
piece.
know you. You had to have touched billions.
So I'm gonna go ahead and put this under my light now. Hopefully I got a lot of overflow,
I know
which is
that
all right.
Cynthia looks like just such a proper lady, but she fondles a lot of clay.
And I've got my UV light turned on. And the light that I have will automatically tell you when 2 minutes is up. It's usually somewhere between 2 and 4 minutes. Sometimes with the Magic Gloss, it's a little bit more than that. Man, I got this right here. What does it say? I think it tells you to take it outside. I'm not sure.
So
Well, it
Paul
doesn't
Eppley
really.
also says set it on a small cookie cutter.
Yeah, yeah, I actually just showed everybody that. And then I didn't do it with this piece. I actually just showed everybody that. Especially if you've already put a veil on there. You can just sit it right on a small cookie cutter like that. So we're gonna give that a couple more minutes. So Paula, I think you use it more than I do, to tell you the truth. I really am a big liquid clay girl. But I do use DeepShine because I do, like I said, if I want to do a bead or something like that, then DeepShine is really, really very, very helpful for that. But I knew I was going to mess that one up. I absolutely knew I was going to mess that one up. We can try it again. We
Well,
can try it again.
if it works, right?
Yeah.
So Nancy H says, "Hi everybody. I'm really late. You're fine. We're getting rocking
Yeah,
and rolling here."
yeah, we're just really, so I have, like I said, you don't necessarily have to have it, in a lure lock bottle like that. Part of the problem is that usually, when I'm working on things, I pull it toward myself and, I'm hanging right over it. Whereas here, I have things, my hands are out from my body. So again, I'm putting a drop down there, and that way, if there's a big air bubble, and that's the same thing whether you're using one of these bottles or one of these bottles. Um, it's a good idea to, we'll see if Paula's idea works well here. It's a good idea to, squirt just a little drop onto, the foil that you're working on, or a piece of paper or something.
So Mary Vanderwood says, "Half of mine always seem to remain sticky." And Paula Eppley says, "I love to use CLS to finish off the piece." Nancy H is doing the same thing I'm doing and going CLS question mark.
Clear liquid Sculpey. And I do like clear liquid Sculpey to finish these, to finish things, but I get slightly, I'll show you guys in a minute, slightly shinier results with Kato clay.
Mary says so she keeps them upside down when she's not using them when they get sticky.
Yes, yeah. You should keep your bottle. I forgot to bring a cup in. You should keep your bottle in a cup or something like that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill in the middle
Do
of
you
this
need
one.
me to make you a lid for that?
You could, but I'm like the crazy people in the supermarket parking lots with my aluminum foil. I kind of like that. I'm also trying to work very quickly because the lights I'm under will actually um, cure this stuff on me, and I don't want that to happen. So then you just fill it in, and then you don't get that problem where it pulls from the edge. It's less noticeable if you fill in the middle than it is if you have to try to fill in, the edge piece. And I'm just making sure. Now, the other thing about, UV resin is that, air bubbles can be a problem. And so what you do is you actually very, very carefully inspect to see if there's any air bubbles. You really have to get close to it. And then a lot of people use this type of a lighter, this candle lighter or gas grill lighter. Um, but they drive me crazy because when you go to point them down, the flame flips up. The flame will never go where I want it to go. So what I use instead is this solder it microjet, and again, that's available at the epoxy jewelry place. And what you do is you pull it out and down, and you guys can't see that flame, but there is a flame there, and that stays where you want it to stay. But it is one that looks like it's just a butane lighter in there, but what you actually do is you refill that with a can of butane. So some people aren't very comfortable with that, but that's how you would do that.
So Nancy H is asking, why foil around the bottle?
so that it doesn't harden in the bottle. It's a clear plastic bottle, and there actually is a big old chunk of hardened resin in there, but it's just floating around. It doesn't get in my way. But I
Mary
actually,
Vanderwood's also asking, so if you cure the edge and then go back and fill the rest, you don't get a line seam?
I haven't had that problem with it. I mean, even now, I that's not even cured. I had done the edge and I put some in the middle, and that's not cured at all. And you can't really see it. And like I said, I usually will just come back like with a toothpick or something and just make sure I got everything. Because it gets very, very hard to see it. So I haven't had that problem with the line. Having said that, if I use it, I use it on mica shift.
I think you're right, Barb. Barb's saying is to keep the rays from outer space away from it.
Yeah. It's to keep my brain safe. Okay, so this
I
one's
think we
looking.
should have a contest. Make a aluminum foil hat for Cynthia Day.
So this is a small piece, but I went all around the outside. Let's see our test dot, right? So I went all around the outside, and that's all cured. This one came out much better. And again, this should be in a cup upside down, but it's not. And every single time, no matter what kind of bottle I'm using, no matter what brand I'm using, I just go ahead and let a few drops, squeeze out, because generally if there's air bubbles, that's where they are. Now, if you're keeping it upside down in a cup, you won't get as many air bubbles by the second or third application. It'll pretty much all be gone.
So Nancy H is asking, how about a heat gun instead of fire?
Well, the problem with a heat gun is you're gonna blow the uncured resin all over the place. I don't know if there's people who work with two-part resin oftentimes just use their breath. They come over and breathe on it.
Well,
I
that's
don't know
just
how I.
because they like to breathe in those
They
fumes.
just they just
You know,
like I said, I started with this one because if I'm gonna mess up, this is where where I mess up. I mess up with UV resin a lot. In fact, I think this one is pretty messed up, but we're gonna give that a couple more minutes.
welcome on in, Sherman. She's wondering what that movie that Woody Allen was in where he was wearing the aluminum foil hat.
I don't
I'm
know.
at a loss.
I don't know. So, and I think that did work out pretty well. Now I'm not. I didn't give this a ton of time to cure, but you can see that's cured on there, and I can't see a line in it. I don't know. Maybe other people could. I can't see any kind of line in that. I'm going to go ahead and cure this one. Get this one cured up. Now, for all I know, you don't really need all this foil. Just,
That's okay. I let you be you. It's okay. Aluminum foil is cheap. You can do what you will with it.
so, with this one, I had some overflow and I tried to wipe it off. But unfortunately, I didn't get all of it. And so what that means is it's cured to the foil. But, you could peel it off the foil. We won't do it now. Get it peeled off the foil, and then you'd have to clean it up with some alcohol. You'd have to clean it up.
Thanks, John. John says lovesick is the Woody Allen movie where he wears an aluminum foil hat.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind. Let's get in that little piece of foil. So that is all the help I can give you with UV resin. It's actually the biggest piece of advice I can give you with UV resin is just say, you have to. It's another skill set. Those of us who work with polymer clay, I think that we're instinctively mixed media artists. We mix a lot of different media. You see people using paint, you see people using alcohol ink, you see people using, all kinds of stuff. But resin art is it's a skill set in and of itself. So it can be really frustrating for people because they're like, well, I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I was pretty good with polymer clay, but you know, look at all the mistakes I made when I tried to add resin. Well, it's a different it's a different it's a different skill set. You have to practice with it and get to know it. So now I have some pieces here. I don't know if I want to do this one or not. And these pieces have been sanded, and they've been sanded to about a thousand grit. So I would avoid using resin on these. And I'd avoid using DeepShine on these because that's when you're going to get a lot of puddles. Yeah, ton of puddles on them. So if you want to put resin on something, then you don't want to sand it beyond 600. And usually I just do 400. And if I have something that's too smooth and I do want to put resin on it, then what I do is I bring it back to 400 for 600 grit. And that's a cool way of doing things. So I'm going to go ahead and do, I think, one more piece with the Magic Gloss, and then we'll move on to the DeepShine. DeepShine, baby. Let me see if this one fits on here. No, let me get a smaller one. Let me get something smaller that this one will fit on. And then Paul is right. If you do get overflow, then it's going to flow down, the cutter, and you can peel it off the cutter. And you won't get it stuck. See, I did that on purpose, that first one, then I messed up. And again, this is particularly important to remember for your first, your first piece. I'm going to flow around the edge here. So have you guys, tried UV resin and been very frustrated with it, or have you never tried it? Did you take one look at it and say no thank you?
So, Chairman says she's resin challenged.
We all are. That's another big secret.
Um, Mary Vanderbilt says she thinks that's been her problem all along, and a great tip, the one you just gave.
Pull it toward the edge here a little bit.
Okay. Note to self, on YouTube, you can only paste 200 characters into a chat.
Ah. Let's see if this one's ready to come out. I'm using my test dot. The other thing to keep in mind too is, these cure, right? They cure into the UV light in just a few minutes. But I would never cure something under a UV light and then sell it the next day, or give it as a gift the next day, or even wear it the next day. They take a bit longer than that to completely cure. Okay, so there you go. That one came out the way we wanted it to come out. Thank you, Paula, for reminding me that you can put it on a cookie cutter or something like that, so that if you have overflow problems, you can take care of that. So that's
That's
a
actually
cool
came,
thing.
that came out nice. I don't see air. I don't see marks.
Yeah. Letting a few drops come out of the bottle before you ever put it on the piece was probably um, the most important thing I ever learned about it. That I just could not get bubble free until I figured that out. And still sometimes, when I'm going around the piece with the bottle, or I'm in the middle, I try not to release pressure and then put pressure again. I tried to keep it one even squeeze, because when you release pressure, you're going to suck air back up into that bottle. So, if something happens, if you have a big piece, you're squeezing with even pressure, your hand gets tired, something happens, and you release the pressure, just know that you've sucked air back into that bottle. So, what you want to do is go ahead and do a few drops onto the foil again. You don't want to um, keep trying to go around, because the next time you squeeze it, some air is going to come out.
So
It's
Jan
just an
Dors, sorry, Jan Dor says she uses it on almost all of her stuff. The trick is to leave it under the light long enough, and you always need two coats for the best look.
So even, yeah, even with Magic Gloss, you use two coats, because this is pretty nice. This is pretty domey and pretty shiny. And my little bird here, that's just one coat on there. But I think maybe in the middle that could use another little coat on there. Um, and one thing that I do like to do, I don't know if this is the best piece to show you one though. I actually like to use the resin sometimes to, attach bales and things like that. So what I would do, I know that CA glue doesn't, hold metal to polymer, at least not for very long. But I would use CA glue or even white glue to just hold the bale in place. And then I put a blob of UV resin over that, or I cover the whole back with UV resin. And then you've got let me see if I have one here that I did that with. Then you've got like a really, really good secure attachment. I didn't use UV resin to attach this bale, but I did use two-part resin to attach this bale, and that's not going to fail. It's just not gonna fail. I just put a drop of two-part UV resin on there and put the bale on there. And I used like a little clamp to just hold it on there until the two-part resin dried. And so that's kind of a cool thing to know, that you can do that you can get that. So, all right. Anybody have any other questions about UV resin, using UV resin?
Not really. Jan Dor said I use hard UV resin. I have a couple of kinds. One is thinner. I use it, on the sides and backs. And the other is thicker, doming type I use for the front.
Okay, so that's the one last thing that we want to talk about. These are not cured, but if they were cured, they're thin pieces. They're only setting 4, which is a medium setting on my pasta machine. And there are times when, if you put resin on the front, it will cause them to curl. So what I usually do, if I want it, say, I got these, baked and sanded up, and I said, yeah, I don't feel like putting a back on them and all that. Usually what I'll do is and start with the back, because I'll put some UV resin on the back and then put it on the front to straighten them out. But I don't usually work that thin. I just don't. I mean, this is um, and that has to do with what my customers perceive as like a good hefty piece of jewelry. This is the thinnest. So this is at the medium setting, and then the backing sheet was one setting beyond medium. So that's about the thinnest that I usually go. I don't usually do real thin stuff. Let's see how this one's. And I am rushing the curing here. I am rushing the curing a little bit. Okay, now I had this standing up. I didn't have it in a cup upside down the way it should be. So again, I'm going to make sure I put a drop or two down here. And then I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. So, I was going to do the other resin. The resin that I really like is from that epoxyjewelry.com, and it's called Ultra Dome. And I was going to show that, but I know that this Lisa Pavelka Magic Glos is much easier for people to get. And my lovely neighbor is mowing the lawn for us. He's such a nice guy. But if you can hear that,
Ginger's
and then
going
I'll
like,
go
there's a
ahead,
guy in her yard. She wants to go out now.
go see him. She wants to go see him.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
All
not
right.
going to
So I
say no
think,
to him mowing the lawn. It needs it.
yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine that he's mowing the lawn. So now we're going to talk about um, DeepShine. Brush on UV finish from tinypandora.com. And again, you're going to see some foil because what I'm going to do is I'm going to decant into this little cup. I'm going to pour some into this little cup, and then I'm going to plop that over it because I am actually under UV lights here. So this was a great idea that I had, except for that I forgot I'm under UV lights. Now, one of the nicest things about DeepShine is, you can very easily put it on curved surfaces or round surfaces, like this bead here. Some of the thicker ones, certainly Magic Gloss, it would be very difficult to do that, right? I know that a lot of people buy Chinese resins that are thicker and thinner, and we should invite them on to talk someday. We should invite them on to talk someday. So the first thing I'm going to tell you about the Tiny Pandora brush on, I'll just say DeepShine, is it does work much better on thicker pieces, like this bead, right? You don't want to put it on pieces that are too flexible. And the reason for that is you will get cracking and crazing and crazing and cracking. And nobody wants that, right? You take all the time to get it on there and all the time to get it on there with no air bubbles and this and that and the other thing. But you would want to put it on something thicker that doesn't really flex so much. A thicker cup or like a bead like this. That's the first thing I'll tell you about DeepShine. The second thing about DeepShine is Teresa gives everybody a brush, and it's basically like a makeup brush, and you want a brush that is really soft like that. If you try to use a stiffer brush, you're going to get lots of lines and brush strokes in there, and you're not going to be happy with it. You're just not going to be happy with it. So you want the softer brush. And I don't want to keep the brush I just showed you actually has DeepShine on it, and I just put the foil on there to keep the DeepShine soft. But I do want to talk a little bit about brush anatomy. This is an older brush that I don't use for like really good quality work anymore, and that's because I got paint in the ferrule. So this metal part of the brush is called a ferrule, and the brush hairs are crimped in there, and there's also some glue in there, and so, when you dip it in paint or varnish or something like that, you're supposed to stop about halfway up the brush. And the reason for that is because once you get paint in there, paint in the ferrule, the hairs it will start to fall out. You can have the highest quality brush on earth, but if if you get, paint or varnish or anything like that up in the ferrule, the hairs are going to start falling out. Doesn't matter if you have the world's best made brush or the world's cheapest brush. That's what's going to happen.
So,
Uh,
sweetie, Beth Sullivan says hi, all. She just arrived.
Hi. So you do, you want to use a nice soft brush, and it's hard to do it with the deep shine, but if you can only put half of, the brush into the deep shine, you're better off doing that because or you're going to go through a lot of makeup brushes, one or the other. They're not that expensive, so it shouldn't be that bad. Um, because the brush hairs will fall out. Hi, Beth. Okay. So you want to use a soft brush with it, and whatever you're putting deep shine on, I try not to sand beyond 400 grit. If it's a very smooth, shiny piece, that you took a lot of time sanding, you're going to get what they call holidays. It will separate, so that you've got little areas where there's deep shine and then areas where there isn't deep shine. So now the rest of what I'm going to tell you about deep shine is actually um, a scientific theory I thought up. I don't know if it's true or not. So when you even though there's not much space between all these little brush hairs, when you dip the brush into paint or varnish or anything, it it just there's some displacement, right? And so so you get some air bubbles in there, right? So, um, if I'm using a brush, say, to put on varnish, I'll wet the whole brush first and then do half of it in varnish in the hopes that I've gotten rid of most of those air bubbles, right? Because air bubbles is a complaint I hear. I'm just checking my piece here. There's a complaint I hear a lot with deep shine. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to decant some deep shine into this little cup. I don't need much. I don't need much at all. And now I'm going to dip this brush into the deep shine, and I'm going to let the deep shine drip off. I don't brush up against the side because that pushes those air bubbles forward. And let me see if I've got. I can see some bubbles there right now. So this is a better one to show you on. And then when I brush it on, I don't brush too hard. I just sort of I keep the brush pretty soft on there. So if you're pressing hard enough that the bristles of the brush are spreading out, then you're pressing too hard.
So I think when we were talking earlier, you're almost using the brush more like a squeegee effect.
I wouldn't say squeegee. Oh shoot, it's more like hydroplaning. I'm letting the brush kind of hydroplane. You know, everybody tells me that you should use as little as possible, as thin a coat as possible with this, but that isn't where I've had success. Where I've had success is, if I'm just sort of letting the brush glide over the deep shine.
See, I can't get into that relaxed Zen space. I would never be good with this because I'm like, let's get this done. Squish.
Yeah, yeah. So that's pretty much how and then, I get it under the lamp as soon as possible. See, this is actually a little too smooth. This piece of clay is a little too smooth because it's trying to push back. It's trying to get some holidays. But to me, the biggest mistake is if you're really raking the brush along the edge of that cup. You don't want to do that.
So
You
really
don't
just
want to
kind of
do.
like let it drip dry.
Yeah.
And then you're really just transferring the liquid. You're not pressing the liquid.
Oh, and then you drop it. And that really messes it up. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I did that live, but I did. Let me see if I can't fix that. But the most successful pieces I've had is, I don't sand them too much. You don't want them to be too smooth, and you keep a light touch. Keep a very light touch with that brush,
And don't throw them around the room.
and don't throw them. Don't throw them. They're not. It's not meant for you to throw it. Let me see if I can. Oh, see, that guy came out nice too. I'll wrap this up for a second here. I gotta clean up what I spilled. And most of this is alcohol cleanup, right? You gotta use alcohol to clean it up. How are we for time?
We are sitting at 1 hour, 14 minutes, sweetie.
Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna very quickly show that the other thing that you can do with DeepShine is you can put it on curved surfaces. So again, I'm letting the DeepShine drip off. So it's a pretty loaded brush. And when you do a bead, it's kind of cool because you can spin the bead.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And then the best thing to do from here is this is very long, a long skewer. Let me put this inside. Let me put this inside here, and let me put you over there. What you can do is basically just take a lump of clay. Sorry, I'm doing everything one-handed. You just take a lump of clay.
So you've sacrificed part of next week's stream.
That's all right. That's all right. All I have to do is roll that out. And you can just put press your bead, your skewer in there, and let it sit in the UV light like that. And that's another reason why I do sit the UV light on some aluminum foil, is because you get the bottom and the top at the same time.
Oh, good idea.
And this is where I mostly use DeepShine, is on a bead like that. So I'm gonna put that in there. There we go. All right. But to be honest with you, my very, very favorite way to get some nice shine is with liquid clay. And where I learned this technique was from Donna Cato's newsletter. Donna Kato puts a newsletter out, and she showed how she used a really thick layer of her liquid clay in a bezel. She had put a little piece of polymer clay that she had decorated in a bezel, and then she filled the bezel with clear liquid clay. And I'll show you some of the results I've gotten with that. This guy is just liquid clay. So all you do is pour a little liquid clay into a cup, and then apply it pretty thickly to your piece. I usually do it with a brush, but this piece is large enough that we could actually even just pour a little bit on there to get us started. And then I use the brush to brush it around. And I keep it thick. It's actually so thick that it's hard to see any decorations, or patterns or anything like that on your clay. And then what you do is you bake this at 330 degrees. And that's not a mistake. 330 degrees for anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes about. And everybody gets really nervous when I tell them that, but most polymer clay, and I'm talking Fahrenheit here, not, gosh, I don't even know what that would be, Celsius. Polymer clay won't really burn usually until 350. And so even when, this piece is mostly primo, but I'm still able to put this Kato liquid clay over it and cure it at 330. Now, you don't want to walk away, right? You don't you don't want to put this in the oven and then, go take your dog for a walk or something like that.
So Jessica's asking that it doesn't burn at that temperature?
No. And even clear liquid Sculpey, the new clear liquid Sculpey, I'm always shocking people because I tell them, read the directions, and they recommend that you cure that at 325. So I know that Deb Crothers has a great um, tutorial where she shows people how to use like an industrial heat gun to cure the liquid clay on pieces. Um, so if you're nervous about putting it in the oven, you could do that. Not a heat embossing gun, not like a craft gun. Um, you could do that, but I've done hundreds of pieces like this now. I did get Deb's tutorial, and I think it was great. But again, I was doing a lot of production work, so I
Is it,
couldn't sit there. I'm sorry.
no, 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 no. I was agreeing with you. I remember that. We were playing where we got the best results for the time.
Yeah. So this is about how thick I put it on there, and then I cure it. Like I said, it's usually somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. Sometimes I do more than one layer, but usually one layer is pretty good. Here we go. And the great thing about this is if it doesn't come completely clear for you after you cure it, you can just use like one of those craft heat embossing guns to wand over it and get it clear. Um, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you guys how to make these next week. And I used liquid clay on these. Just use, and like I said, if you're saying, oh, it's not quite clear, but I'm seeing some smoke or I'm smelling something or I'm nervous about it, you can take it out And, if I could remember where I put it, I would show you. It's just one of those craft, the heat embossing guns that people use with embossing powder and stuff like that. And
So
that works
Sherman's, oh, I'm
good.
sorry, sweetie. So Sherman said she
Go
took
ahead.
a course called Look Like Glass using Kato liquid clay frame 6 years ago. Amazing, not Kato. Not that Kato didn't burn.
Yeah.
And
No,
she's
so
also
like
used the torch method as well.
yeah. So you can go over it with the heat embossing gun. Now, oftentimes for me, it's not so much that it's not clear, but it's not as shiny as I would like it to be sometimes. So what I do is I buff it. And excuse this, but
You're muted now, sweetie.
I should explain to people that I'm muted. Like,
I put a mute button in for the roller and for the wheel. She'll let me know as soon as she's unmuted. But for now, we get to look at her ear, or where it would be.
but see,
You're
that one
unmuted,
was
sweetie.
okay. So that one wasn't quite as shiny. It was more like this one, and I just buffed it for a little while, and it got it very, very glass-like, and it will hold that. It will hold that. This is a couple of years old now. Again, this is from a tutorial I made about making polymer clay paint and doing fluid art with polymer clay. Both these pieces are from that, but it does hold the shine. So it's that thick. It's that thick so that you want it to be hard to see um, any designs or anything like that in it. Um, and then 10 to 20 minutes at 330. And I know people are like, oh, that can't be right. But like I said, even Sculpey Liquid Clear, they recommend 325. So, and a lot of people don't know that because it's very small on the bottle. But it's very helpful. And then, like I said, if it's not quite as clear as shiny as you want, then you can wand over it with a heat gun. But I avoid that. And I avoid that because I very often will scorch the piece that I'm working on. And that's a shame with this piece because I can sand this off, and this is much easier to sand off than resin or, DeepShine or anything like that. But I silk screened over this. So chances are I would sand off the silk screen, and then I'd have to put the silk screen back on there and stuff like that. So this guy, I didn't mess around with any heat or anything like that. I just went ahead, baked it at 330, let it get as clear as it was going to get, left it in there for as long as I was comfortable with. And then when I took it out, I just buffed it. And I do use a flannel buffing wheel, and we do have a link to that. We have links to everything now.
That's my cue to say, get off your ass and find the link.
But get off your butt. And so see, there's a bead. Beads are hard to sand. Paula's brother-in-law, Ken, just released a whole ebook on using a tumbler, to get your beads nice and smooth, and then I think he still buffs them. So you can take a look at that. That's how that piece came out. And that's how that piece came out. Pretty nice. And this one could probably use a second layer. And that's how that piece came out. So that's DeepShine. UV resin. and liquid clay.
I kind of like the liquid clay because you can really see that you've covered it or not, and the depth that you've covered the piece. Whenever you're using the UV stuff and it's so clear, I'm like, is it really there or is it an illusion?
Yeah, I talked about that a little bit about how with resin sometimes you it's like I call it resin blindness. You know, you can't quite tell. One of the things I'm not sure if it's true of the new Sculpey Liquid Clear, and I have used Sculpey Liquid Clear to do this. I have. I've had to fiddle with it more with heat guns and stuff like that. But I'm the type of person, I got the heat gun or the heat embossing tool, and I'm going over my piece and I'm looking around the kitchen and I'm talking to Mish, and then if I'm not careful, I scorch it. So I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And so I'm not sure this is true of the Sculpey clear liquid, but the Kato clear liquid is also self-leveling. It's also self-leveling. So it looks like it's pulled from the edges here a little bit, but if you were here, you could see that that is shiny. There is liquid clay on there. So it does dome. It does dome. So and it's if there are bubbles, then all you do is kind of pull them out with a toothpick. And it's clay on clay. And the final thing, I have not had DeepShine go yellow. I haven't had DeepShine go yellow at all, but I've yet to find a resin that won't eventually go yellow. Now, some people say that they've had trouble with Kato liquid clay going sticky after a couple of years in a drawer or if you keep it in plastic. I've never had that happen. So I'm not quite sure, how, I mean, this is just as shiny and nice and not sticky as it was the day that I made it. Um, and I don't know if it's because I put things in the oven at 330. I think if you try to do it with the heat gun, then maybe you get some uneven curing. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. But I did hear Ginger and a few other people say that if it does get oily or sticky or anything like that, that you can just wipe it off with a paper towel. So, all of these methods have their benefits. All of these methods have their downfalls. So if you can, let me buff this guy up. I'm gonna have you mute me again, Mish.
Okay, you're muted. I actually have fun working with resin, Mary. We had a really fun stream a few years back when we were on Twitch where we were doing resin pours and taking alcohol ink and building really pretty color designs in the resins. And I had a blast doing that.
It
Okay,
wasn't
you're,
um, it wasn't alcohol ink, Mish. It was Prisma paints that we were
oh,
using.
okay.
So this is just a plain old everyday sanded and buffed item. you know. So I don't think that resin's bad. I don't think that deep shine's bad. I don't think that the clear liquid clay is bad. I don't necessarily think one method is better than the other method, but they all have their place. But my biggest problem with resin is I've yet to find one that doesn't eventually yellow. Now that's not as important to me as it used to be, but people will come back 5 years after they bought a piece and said, it went yellow. so,
You don't want to know what I tell them.
so whenever possible, I will either use the liquid clay because it's clay on clay. I know it's compatible, or I'll sand and buff, and I'm gonna learn to use my tumbler.
I love the depth of that piece you're holding.
This is a piece I learned in a class with Dan Cormier. This was hard to sand and buff because there's ridges, but
Yeah.
dimensional ridges. So, any more questions?
I think folks are pretty settled in. I'll give it a couple minutes for questions. One of the things I wanted to say is, guys, I want to thank you again for getting us over 1,000 YouTube subscribers. We actually got the official note that last week saying, congratulations, you're over 1,000 subscribers. And I wanted to ask you to do just as good a job if you could give us a follow and likes on our Facebook page. We're only 150 away from 1,000 there, too. Those are good milestones for us.
Yeah, they really are. They really are. Thank you so much. So I hope you found tonight helpful. We'll put our...
And if you like this kind of stuff, let us know, because these, we don't mind doing these kinds of streams. They're fun for us. Projects are nice, but sometimes just going over the different choices you have can be really beneficial.
Next week, we're going to do these guys. We're going to use some of Mary Jo Coleman's silk screens, and we're going to silk screen over some. I'm going to show you one more method for a mini blend. And we're gonna silk screen over some mica shift. Very pretty. Very simple, very pretty.
Jessica says so the campaign begins.
It does. It does.
All right, guys. We are going to go eat some dinner. The dog is looking at me like I was happy when I was locked in, but I want to get out of the office now, so can you open the friggin' door? And what I'm getting back from people is they love this kind of stuff, sweetie.
Oh, good. So, like 1 week I was going to do, because part of the problem too is as I'm prepping all this stuff, it's a lot of clay. So I was going to do some things too, like I have some different tools to make ear wires, and I was going to demonstrate, how to make ear wires by hand, and then how to make ear wires with these different jigs and templates that I have. I'll give you guys a chance to look at them and see if it's something that you're interested in before you spend your money. And in the meantime, I can be getting some ear wires made so I can get some stuff put in an online store.
And if anybody knows somebody who wants to donate clay to a good cause, just let us know. John wants to know what's for dinner tonight. Have we decided between shells or shepherd's pie?
There's a big part of me that really wants the manicotti, but the shepherd's pie is just heating it up. So I think we're going to just do shepherd's pie.
Excuse me, that sounds good to me. All right, guys, we're out of here. Thank you so much. If you can afford it and you haven't gotten it already, grab a tutorial because, folks, that's how we make our living. That pays the rent. If you want to donate and buy us a cup of coffee, the link is on the YouTube page. Go for it. We appreciate it. I'm just going to do a teaser. There's some cool changes coming down the road, and I'm not going to say any more than that. So
we're actually thinking of a name change. We're thinking of a name change. So keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open. So, all right.
All right, folks. Bye-bye. Have fun. And damn it, I didn't type it. I'm remembering to say goodbye in chat because it shuts it off when I end the stream. All right, guys. We will see. If you're coming back for tomorrow, we will see you tomorrow. And by the way, we're on at 2 o'clock tomorrow. Facebook. All right.